Конечно, потенциал объединенной организации НАТО и России несопоставим. Мы понимаем. Но мы также и понимаем, что Россия одна из ведущих ядерных держав. По некоторым компонентам, по современности даже многих опережает.
Some international airlines cancelled flights to the Ukrainian capital, and troops there unloaded fresh shipments of weapons from NATO members, as its president sought to project confidence in the face of US warnings of possible invasion within days by a growing number of Russian forces. President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to President Joe Biden for about an hour, insisting that Ukrainians had the country under safe and reliable protection against feared attack by a far stronger Russian military, aides said afterward. The White House said both agreed to keep pushing both deterrence and diplomacy to try to stave off a feared Russian military offensive. The Biden administration has become increasingly outspoken about its concerns that Russia will stage an incident in the coming days that would create a false pretext for an invasion of Ukraine. US and European intelligence findings in recent days have sparked worries that Russia may try to target a scheduled Ukrainian military exercise slated in eastern Ukraine to launch such a false flag operation, according to two people familiar with the matter. They spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly about it. American intelligence officials believe targeting the military exercise is just one of multiple options that Russia has weighed as a possibility for a false flag operation. The White House has underscored that they do not know with certainty if President Vladimir Putin has made a final determination to launch an invasion. Moscow's forces are massing on Ukraine's north, east, and south in what the Kremlin insists are military exercises. A US official updated the Biden administration's estimate for how many Russian forces are now staged near Ukraine's borders to more than 130,000, up from the more than 100,000 the US has cited publicly in previous weeks. The official spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the administration's conclusions. Zelensky has repeatedly played down the US warnings, questioning the increasingly strident statements from US officials in recent days that Russia could be planning to invade as soon as midweek. He said, "We understand all the risks, we understand that there are risks. If you, or anyone else, has additional information regarding a 100% Russian invasion starting on the 16th, please forward that information to us." But while Zelensky has urged against the panic that he fears could undermine Ukraine's economy, he and his civilian and military leaders also are preparing defenses, soliciting and receiving a flow of arms from the US and other NATO members. A military cargo aircraft carrying US-made Stinger anti-aircraft missiles and ammunition from NATO member Lithuania landed, bolstering the country's defenses against any attack by air. Zelensky wore military olive drab at a drill with tanks and helicopters near Ukraine's border with Russian-annexed Crimea this weekend. In the nearby city of Kalanchak, some expressed disbelief that Putin would really send his troops rolling into the country. In Kiev, others expressed uncertainty whether any Russian move would be economic, military, or happen at all. One woman, Alona Buznitskaya, speaking on a central street of the capital bearing a few signs declaring, "I love Ukraine," said she was calm. The US largely has not made public the evidence it says is underlying its most specific warnings on possible Russian planning or timing. "We're not going to give Russia the opportunity to conduct a surprise here, to spring something on Ukraine or the world," Jake Sullivan, the US National Security Advisor, told CNN about the US warnings.
We continue to see signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. As we've said before, we are ready either way.
The Russians have deployed missile, air, naval and special operations forces, as well as supplies to sustain an invasion. This week, Russia moved 6 amphibious assault ships into the Black Sea, augmenting its capability to land on the coast. Putin denies any intention of attacking Ukraine. Russia is demanding that the West keep former Soviet countries out of NATO. It also wants NATO to refrain from deploying weapons near its border and to roll back alliance forces from Eastern Europe, demands flatly rejected by the West. Biden and Putin spoke for more than an hour, but the White House offered no suggestion that the call diminished the threat of an imminent war in Europe. Reflecting the West's concerns, Dutch airline KLM has cancelled flights to Ukraine until further notice, the company said. The Ukrainian charter airline SkyUp said its flight from Madeira, Portugal, to Kiev was diverted to the Moldovan capital. And Ukraine's air traffic safety agency Ukraruk issued a statement declaring the airspace over the Black Sea to be a zone of potential danger and recommended that planes avoid flying over the sea February 14 to 19. The Putin-Biden conversation, following a call between Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron earlier in the day, came at a critical moment for what has become the biggest security crisis between Russia and the West since the Cold War. US officials believe they have mere days to prevent an invasion and enormous bloodshed in Ukraine. While the US and NATO have made clear they do not intend to send troops to Ukraine to fight Russia, any invasion and resulting punishing sanctions promised by the US and other countries could reverberate far beyond the former Soviet Republic, affecting energy supplies, global markets, and the power balance in Europe. The United States was pulling most of its staff from the embassy in Kiev and urged all American citizens to leave Ukraine immediately. Britain joined other European nations in telling its citizens to leave. Biden has bolstered the US military presence in Europe as reassurance to allies on NATO's eastern flank. The 3,000 additional soldiers ordered to Poland come on top of 1,700 who are on their way there. The US Army also is shifting 1,000 soldiers from Germany to Romania, which like Poland shares a border with Ukraine. On the other side, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will travel to Europe for meetings with NATO leaders as Russia added more military forces around Ukraine's border for an invasion that is expected any day. Austin will first meet with NATO defense ministers in Belgium and then travel to Poland on the alliance's eastern flank, where he will meet with that country's president and visit with deployed US forces at an air base, Chief Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said during a press conference. The secretary will also go to Lithuania to meet with the Prime Minister and Defense Minister, and US troops there. Recently, the US pulled 160 Florida National Guard soldiers out of Ukraine. The troops were assigned to the 53rd Infantry Brigade combat team and were part of a previously planned training mission with Ukrainian forces. Austin's visit to Brussels is partly meant to underscore the US commitment to NATO's Article 5, which calls for collective defense if any member is attacked, on what could be the eve of the largest military action in Europe since World War II. NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time in its history after the 2001 terrorist attacks on the US. In Poland, he will go to Powice Air Base, which is west of the capital Warsaw, to meet with US and Polish troops. The centrally located Polish base is a hub for US Army forces that rotate into the country for joint operations and exercises. A joint meeting is also planned between Austin and the defense leaders of Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia, 3 NATO members that border Russia who have been among the most anxious about Moscow aggression in recent years. 2 of the 3 also share a border with Russia's close ally Belarus, where Putin has positioned thousands of troops in recent months.